the flickering light. The storm rolled in with a ferocity that seemed almost unnatural, casting the coastal village of Wrenhaven in shadow long before the sun could set. Talia Marrow, a cartographer by trade and a seeker of truths by nature, tightened her scarf against the biting wind as she approached the towering silhouette of the Margrave Lighthouse. Its beam, once a beacon of hope to sailors navigating the treacherous cliffs, had gone dark 3 nights ago. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the curse of the Margrave, a tale of betrayal, vengeance, and madness. But Talia dismissed such notions. She dealt in facts, not fables. The heavy iron gate creaked as she pushed it open, its sound swallowed by the wailing wind. Talia glanced back at the figure standing a few steps behind her. Captain Elias Thorne, a former naval officer turned reluctant ally, carried an aura of skepticism as rugged as his weathered coat. His hand rested on the hilt of his cutlass, an old habit born of countless battles at sea. "This place stinks of trouble," he muttered, his sharp eyes scanning the lighthouse grounds. "And I'm not just talking about the fish. Superstitions won't solve the mystery, Captain," Talia replied, her voice steady but tinged with an edge of irritation. She pulled a leather journal from her satchel, flipping it open to a map of the area. The lighthouse keeper vanished. The light went out, and now ships are wrecking on the reefs. "We need answers, or a miracle," Elias said dryly, stepping past her and onto the cobblestone path. The entrance to the lighthouse loomed ahead, its weathered oak door adorned with carvings of seafaring symbols, compasses, waves, and stars. Talia traced a finger over the engravings, her thoughts turning to the stories she'd heard of the Margrave family, who had maintained the lighthouse for generations. They were a proud lineage, each member bound to the tower as if by an unbreakable oath, until something shattered it. Inside, the air was damp and carried a faint metallic tang. Talia lit a lantern, its warm glow illuminating the circular stone walls. Papers were scattered across a wooden desk near the base of the spiral staircase, as though someone had left in a great hurry. Elias picked up a half-burned candle from the desk, sniffing it before tossing it aside. "Looks like they didn't plan on coming back." Talia ignored him, focusing instead on a piece of parchment pinned beneath a brass compass. The handwriting was precise, yet frantic. The shadows move when the light does not. She felt a shiver crawl up her spine. "Who leaves a note like this?" "Someone who's seen too much," Elias said, leaning against the desk. "Let me guess. This is the part where you insist we go up those stairs." Talia smirked. "Only if you're brave enough to follow." The staircase spiraled upward into darkness, the lantern casting flickering shadows on the walls. Each step echoed ominously, and the air grew colder as they ascended. Talia tried to push aside the growing unease, but the lighthouse felt alive, its silence charged with an almost predatory stillness. Midway up, they came to a landing where a door stood slightly ajar. Inside was a small living quarters, a cot, a bookshelf, and a table cluttered with personal belongings. Talia's eyes were drawn to a journal lying open on the table. She picked it up, scanning the last entry. "The light is more than a guide. It is a barrier. Without it they come. I hear them now in the walls, in the wind. If I fail..." The writing ended abruptly, the final line smeared as though the author had been pulled away mid-sentence. Elias peered over her shoulder. "Well, that's cheerful. Do you always drag people into cursed lighthouses? Or am I just lucky?" Talia didn't answer. Her gaze lingered on a small sketch tucked into the back of the journal, a crude but chilling depiction of twisted, shadowy figures with hollow eyes. Beneath it, a single word was scrawled, "Marrow." "Let's keep moving," she said, her voice quieter now. At the top of the stairs, they reached the lantern room. The massive Fresnel lens, which should have been spinning and casting its light across the sea, sat still and silent. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and Talia felt her chest tighten as she approached the control panel. "It's not broken," she murmured, running her fingers over the polished brass dials. "It's been disabled." "By who?" Elias asked, his voice low. "Or what?" she corrected, glancing out the window. The storm had intensified, waves crashing against the cliffs with relentless fury. Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating the jagged rocks below. Elias stiffened, his hand gripping his cutlass. "Did you see that?" "See what?" "There, on the cliffs." He pointed, his face grim. Something moved. Talia followed his gaze. But the darkness was impenetrable. She turned back to the lens, her mind racing. If the light was a barrier, as the journal suggested, then its absence might have invited something into the world. A sudden sound echoed from below, a deep, resonant thud, followed by the unmistakable creak of the lighthouse door. "We're not alone," Elias said, drawing his cutlass. Talia extinguished the lantern, plunging the room into darkness. "We need to fix the light," she whispered, her pulse hammering in her ears. "And hope it's enough," Elias muttered. They moved quickly, their steps careful and silent. Talia worked on the control panel, while Elias kept watch by the window, his silhouette a tense outline against the stormlit sky. The mechanisms were complex, but her years of studying maritime technology gave her an edge. Just as she adjusted the final dial, a chilling voice echoed up the staircase, a sound that was neither fully human nor entirely alien. It spoke in a language she didn't recognize, but its intent was clear. They were coming. "Any time now, Marrow," Elias hissed, his cutlass gleaming as he faced the stairs. With a triumphant click, the panel came to life. The lens began to spin, its light piercing the storm and driving back the shadows. Talia felt a surge of relief, until she saw the figures below, their hollow eyes fixed on the tower. The light had forced them into view, but it hadn't stopped their advance. "Run!" she shouted, grabbing Elias's arm and pulling him toward the stairs. The figures were climbing now, their movements jerky but relentless. As Talia and Elias descended, the beam of light followed, sweeping across the walls and illuminating their pursuers. They were made of darkness itself, their forms shifting and writhing as though barely contained by gravity. "We can't fight them," Elias said, slashing at one that got too close. His cutlass passed through it harmlessly, leaving only a faint wisp of smoke. "We don't need to fight," Talia replied, her mind racing. "We just need to survive." They reached the base of the lighthouse, the door slamming shut behind them. The figures pressed against the windows, but the light seemed to hold them at bay, for now. "What next?" Elias asked, breathing heavily. Talia held up the journal, her fingers trembling. "We need to find out what the Marrows knew, and why this place is so much more than a lighthouse." The storm howled around them as the beam of light swept across the cliffs, keeping the darkness at bay. But for how long? Cultural exchange and shock. Chapter 1. A World Apart. The first time Leah stepped off the train into Kiyoshi Station, she felt as though she had stumbled into another universe. The air was dense with the aroma of grilled skewers, intermingling with the sharp tang of pickled vegetables. Neon signs buzzed in languages she barely understood, and the melodic hum of announcements echoed in the station. Everything felt alive, almost too alive, as if the city itself had a pulse. Leah tightened her grip on the worn leather strap of her suitcase, scanning the sea of unfamiliar faces for her host. Her program's pamphlet had promised an immersive cultural exchange, but nothing had prepared her for the sensory overload of Tokyo. "Leah Brown," a calm voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see a man in his late 20s standing a few feet away, holding a small placard with her name printed in neat characters. He had an air of quiet precision, his dark hair neatly combed, his suit impeccably tailored. "Yes, that's me," she said, offering a nervous smile. "I'm Haruto Takeda," he said, bowing slightly. "Your host, brother." She mimicked his bow awkwardly, and his lips quirked in a subtle, amused smile. "Come," Haruto said, picking up her suitcase as though it weighed nothing. "The house is not far. Welcome to Japan." Leah quickly discovered that her new home was a meticulous blend of tradition and modernity. The Takeda residence, a modest two-story house nestled in a quiet neighborhood, had sliding paper doors that whispered shut and a low dining table where everyone sat cross-legged on cushions. At first, every gesture, how to hold chopsticks, when to bow, Even how to arrange her slippers at the entrance felt like a potential cultural misstep. Dinner on the first night was an elaborate affair, hosted by Mrs. Takeda, who insisted on serving Leah every course herself. "Do you like sushi?" Mrs. Takeda asked, her voice laced with anticipation. "Yes, very much," Leah replied, though she struggled to mask her surprise at the raw fish laid out so elegantly. The sushi tasted fresher than anything she'd ever had in Boston, but it was the miso soup that captured her attention. Its warmth seeped into her bones, calming her nerves. Haruto watched her with quiet curiosity. "You handle chopsticks well, for someone who didn't grow up using them." Leah chuckled. "My best friend in high school was Korean. She made me practice every time we went out." "Ah," Haruto replied, nodding thoughtfully. "A head start, then." The central conflict began to brew 2 weeks into Leah's stay, when she was tasked with presenting an English lesson at the local community center. Haruto had volunteered to help Leah prepare, but their differences in communication styles soon became apparent. "You need to be more formal," Haruto said as they reviewed her draft. "In Japanese culture, addressing elders or authority figures casually can seem disrespectful." Leah frowned. "But in American culture, being too formal can make you seem unapproachable." "Perhaps," Haruto countered, his tone measured, "but you're not in America anymore." The weight of his words settled uncomfortably between them. Leah realized he wasn't trying to be unkind. Haruto was simply reflecting the rigidity of a culture that prioritized harmony over individual expression. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being asked to mold herself into something unrecognizable. The lesson itself was a mixed success. While the attendees appreciated her effort to include local idioms and gestures, one elderly man muttered something under his breath that Haruto later translated as "she talks like she's from another planet." The comment stung more than Leah expected. That evening, Leah sat in the garden behind the Takeda house, watching the koi fish ripple the pond surface. Haruto joined her, carrying 2 mugs of green tea. "You did well today," he said after a long silence. "Did I?" she replied, her voice tinged with doubt. Haruto placed the mugs on the wooden deck, his expression softening. "You were trying to bridge 2 worlds. That's not easy. I feel like I'm failing at both," Leah admitted, running a hand through her hair. "Back home, I never think twice about how I speak or act. Here, I second-guess everything." Haruto considered this. Culture shock is not about finding the differences. It's about learning to navigate them. That takes time. Leah met his gaze, grateful for the unexpected kindness in his words. For the first time, she saw beyond Haruto's stoic exterior, a man who carried the weight of expectations just as she did. Over the next few weeks, their tentative understanding began to blossom. Haruto introduced Leah to local traditions, from making mochi to visiting a Shinto shrine, while Leah shared snippets of her life in Boston, including her love for jazz music and her mother's famous apple pie. They argued often, but laughed even more, each encounter a lesson in patience and compromise. The turning point came during the Obon Festival, a time when families honor their ancestors. Leah, clad in a borrowed yukata, helped Haruto and his family prepare lanterns to float on the river. She marveled at the solemn beauty of the ritual, the way each lantern carried stories of those who came before. As the lanterns drifted away, Leah turned to Haruto. "Thank you for sharing this with me." He nodded, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the lanterns. "Thank you for embracing it." In that moment, Leah understood that cultural exchange wasn't about erasing differences, but about finding the threads that connected them. The discomfort, the misunderstandings, they were all part of the process of learning to coexist. By the time Leah boarded the train to return home, she no longer felt like an outsider. She had become a part of the Takeda family, and Tokyo had etched itself into her heart. As the train pulled away, she glanced back at Haruto, who stood on the platform, his hand raised in a small wave. "You'll come back, won't you?" he had asked earlier. Of course, she had promised, and this time, she meant it. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and smoke as twilight bled into the forest clearing. Alara tightened the strap on her leather satchel, her fingers brushing the roughened fabric of a map she could now trace from memory. Ahead of her, the Tower of Erseth loomed, a jagged silhouette against the fading sun, its spires clawing at the heavens. At her side, Kale paced like a caged wolf, his hand resting on the hilt of a blade too ornate for a simple mercenary. His storm-gray eyes flicked to the tower, then to Alara. "You're certain this is the place?" Alara glanced at him, her expression carefully neutral. "The map led us here, didn't it?" "It also led us through a bandit-infested gorge," Kale countered, voice laced with dry humor. "Excuse me if I'm skeptical." From behind them, the quiet rustle of fabric signaled Dane's approach. The mage moved like a shadow, his dark robes blending with the encroaching night. "Whether it's the right place or not, something waits inside. The wards are ancient but decayed. Whatever guarded it is either gone or asleep." "Comforting," Kale muttered, though his grip tightened on his blade. Alara stepped forward, her resolve steady. The Tower of Erseth was more than a legend. It was the key to unraveling the curse binding her homeland. For 2 years, she had chased whispers and half-truths, crossing treacherous lands and evading enemies who sought to bury the tower's secrets. Now, standing before it, she felt the weight of every choice she had made pressing against her chest. "Stay close," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We don't know what's waiting inside." The air grew colder as they approached the entrance, an archway carved with runes that pulsed faintly with residual magic. Dane muttered an incantation, his fingertips brushing the symbols. A ripple of energy passed through the air, and the runes dimmed, granting them passage. Inside, the tower was a husk of its former self. Dust coated the stone floor, and cobwebs clung to the high, vaulted ceilings. The air was thick with an almost tangible stillness, broken only by the faint echo of their footsteps. Kale scanned the shadows, his voice low. "If this place is so important, why is it abandoned?" "It's not abandoned," Dane replied. He knelt by a shattered pedestal, inspecting the remnants of what might have been a seal. "It's waiting." Before Kale could press further, a low hum filled the air, vibrating through the stone beneath their feet. Alara turned sharply, her hand instinctively reaching for the pendant around her neck. The hum grew louder, coalescing into a deep, resonant voice. "Who dares disturb the Keeper's sanctum?" The question reverberated through the chamber, and a figure materialized before them, its form shifting between human and something far less recognizable. Its eyes burned like embers, and a crown of jagged light hovered above its head. Alara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. "I am Alara of Valindril. I seek the truth buried within this tower." The figure's gaze bore into her, as though peeling back the layers of her soul. "The truth is a burden few can bear. What price are you willing to pay?" Kale tensed, but Alara held up a hand to still him. "Whatever it takes," she said, her voice unwavering. The Keeper tilted its head, a gesture that felt almost curious. "Very well, but know this. Truth and sacrifice walk hand in hand." With a wave of its hand, the chamber shifted. The walls fell away, replaced by a vast expanse of stars. Alara stood at the edge of a precipice, the abyss below swirling with visions of her past, present, and a future she could not yet comprehend. The Keeper's voice echoed in her mind. "Choose, Alara of Valindril. What will you surrender to claim the truth?" Her thoughts raced. She had already given so much. Her home, her family, the life she might have had. But as the swirling vision solidified into an image of her village, its people suffering under the curse, she knew there was no choice. "I surrender my name," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let it be erased from the annals of history, so long as my people are freed." The stars dimmed, and the chamber reformed around her. The Keeper regarded her with something akin to approval. "Your sacrifice is accepted. The truth you seek lies within the heart of the tower. But be warned, it may not be the salvation you hope for." Before Alara could respond, the Keeper vanished, leaving the three of them alone once more. Kale broke the silence, his voice edged with concern. "What did it mean by that?" Alara didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the spiral staircase that wound its way upward into the tower's depths. Whatever lay ahead, it was too late to turn back now. "Let's find out," she said, her voice firm, though the weight of her decision lingered like a shadow. As they ascended, the air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in, the oppressive silence broken only by their breathing. Alara clutched her pendant, its faint warmth the only comfort she had left. She didn't look back, even as doubt gnawed at the edges of her resolve. At the top of the staircase, a massive door barred their way, its surface etched with more runes. This time, they pulsed faintly, as if waiting for something or someone. Alara reached out, and the runes flared to life, the light momentarily blinding. When the door swung open, what lay beyond stole the breath from her lungs. A vast chamber, its walls lined with crystalline panels, each one reflecting a fragment of a memory. Not hers, but countless lives intertwined with the tower's ancient magic. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested a single, glowing orb. Dane inhaled sharply. "The heart of Erseth," he murmured, reverence in his voice. "The source of the tower's power." Alara approached the pedestal, her hand hovering over the orb. As her fingers brushed its surface, a surge of energy coursed through her, and the visions in the crystals shifted, showing a future she could scarcely believe. Kale's voice broke through the haze. "Alara, what do you see?" She turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of wonder and dread. "I see what must be done,"